transplant designed to treat the cancer. Dr. David Prentice of the Charlotte Lozier Institute tells AFN the donor was selected because he lacked a protein flag called CCR5.
But then they gave him these donor cells that lacked this little protein flag, took care of the lymphoma, restarted his immune system, but now the virus didn't have any place to attach to. It couldn't infect him.
This one case demonstrates the value of using adult stem cells for treating various diseases and other medical conditions.
It doesn't mean that he's necessarily cured, but he is in what we would call a long-term remission. He not only does not have this cancer anymore, he does not, as far as we can tell, have HIV infection.
He is the second patient in remission from HIV with use of adult stem cells. Prentice says it doesn't mean the treatment will work for every HIV patient because it takes a certain type of donor not readily available. But further research might reveal the treatment could be applied more widely in the future. Medical treatments from research on tiny human beings, embryos, has produced no treatments after millions of dollars in research. I'm Charlie Butts.
Some countries are starting to ground the Boeing 737 MAX 8 plane after a crash of an Ethiopian Airlines jet killed 157 people, including 8 Americans. The Ministry of Transportation in Indonesia mandated the planes be grounded today as the investigation is underway, as did Ethiopia, the Cayman Islands, and China. The U.S. has not grounded the planes. American Family News is online at onenewsnow.com and download the One News Now mobile app. I'm Rusty Pugh.
Fellow Americans and all of our friends, join me nightly right here on Urban Family Talk. The C.L. Bryant Show, 7 p.m. Central, as we build the bridge to conversation throughout our great nation, the greatest nation on the face of the planet, the greatest success story the world has ever known. That'll be America, 7 p.m. on Urban Family Talk.
She's sharp, pointed, and insightful. This is Stacy on the Right on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
2 of the world's biggest polluters are in fact making the globe greener. In these images gathered by NASA, you can see an increase in foliage in China and in India. The greening effect is mainly due to ambitious tree planting in China and intensive farming in both countries.
You know, a debate is a very carefully orchestrated thing. I go on Tucker Carlson, I go on Fox and Friends. It can get uncomfortable. As they say, you don't need to persuade your friends, you need to persuade people who disagree with you. So I would have made a different decision.
I think it's important to get all the evidence before we make a decision. The president's obviously said he would be very disappointed if that's the direction North Korea were going in, but I don't want to get out in front of the facts we actually know at this point.
And now, Stacy Washington.
Welcome to the program. It's Monday. So we survived. Did you spring forward? I can't say I sprang forward. I more like lurched forward against my will, kicking and screaming. Although I do enjoy the part of the year where it's sunny later into the evening, much more than when it gets dark at 4 o'clock. I honestly do enjoy that portion of the year more, except for the fact that Christmas is in the other part of the year. So, I guess you take your lumps. Welcome to the program. I'm Stacy Washington, host of Stacy on the Right here on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk. It's good to be with you. I'm suffering through a mild cold. It's like every attack possible. Launch it. Let's get it going over here. But we have a fantastic show planned for you. Regardless of that, we're going to chat with Burt Folsom. He is a distinguished fellow at Hillsdale College, and he has quite a bit to say about bias in U.S. history textbooks. And this connects up to main news stories that are going on right now, like the newest poll results out that show that millennials, 48% of them would prefer to live in a socialist country. I don't know where they'd get their Starbucks and their lattes from. They wouldn't have iPhones, but I guess they're willing to give all of that up for belonging to the herd and being a part of the pack. So we'll talk to him about that next segment. we want to talk like a Second Amendment update kind of thing with a robbery where these two people were meeting up to facilitate the sale of an iPhone. We'll get into the story in the third segment why they were together other than the phone. I think that was just it. And then someone brandishes a fake gun, and you know the rest of the story. Good guy with a gun wins out. So we're going to talk about that in the third segment. We'll take your calls, 866-963-2037, 866-963-2037. And we're also going to listen to a little bit of audio from the smartest man in America, Thomas Sowell, and a little bit more on that whole, some kids, like one of your kids is smarter than your other kid, same two parents, same household, same socioeconomic background. How can we account for this? And in just a minute, in fact, right now, we're going to get into infinite victimhood. Yeah, I said it, infinite victimhood. Now, you know how I feel about the fact that so many of us, if you just walk up or see us passing and you notice that we have a permanent tan, whether you're Hispanic or Black or Asian or whatever minority group you might be a part of, it's automatically assumed that you're some kind of a victim. Regardless of your circumstances, you could have more money than the person who's observing you. You could have higher social status. You could have a better education. You could have a better job. You could have, a family, intact family situation, whatever. People just assume minority group victim. And that drives me crazy because that completely obliterates anything you've done for yourself, any work you've done. The fact that you might be, a Bible-believing bedrock Christian, knowing that everything you have comes from God. And so you can never be a victim because he didn't create any victims. He didn't make any victims. When you look back at what God created, their victim is not in there at all. So it was really funny. We love these stories here on the show where you got a hardcore liberal who toes the line and abides by everything that the liberal orthodoxy requires. And if there's anybody who gets that T-shirt and wears the flag and flies it proudly, it's Alyssa Milano. She's so far on the left, she's not even an entertainer anymore. And that's what's so interesting. It seems like she would be in Hollywood pushing for equality between producers and the people that act in the films and the writing staff, and working on creating quality programming that advances whatever her causes are, do it in Hollywood. She's completely left Hollywood. Now she just tweets all the time and shows up at the UN a lot to go against our country. And then anywhere there's a victim, she's right there flying her flag. This story is hilarious. You got Alyssa Milano, she's on Twitter, and she sends out this tweet about she's tweeting about transgenders. And as she's tweeting about the transgenders, one of the transgenders, because, they're perpetually offended and always ready to fight, even people on their own side. One of the transgenders says, yeah, but you're not trans. And she says, well, actually, I am. I'm trans, I'm Black, I'm gay, I'm straight. She just goes into this big tirade. Here, I'll read you the exact tweet. She says, I'm trans. I'm a person of color. I'm an immigrant. I'm a lesbian. I'm a gay man. I am the disabled. Now, aside from the fact that that's crazy talk and she shouldn't be, she's trying to identify with these people, but instead it comes off as her making these pronouncements that we know are demonstrably false. She says, I'm everything, and so are you, Kirk. Don't be afraid of what you don't know or understand. No one wants to hurt you. We're all just looking for our happily ever after. Now, that whole second part of the tweet, we could unpack that and we could go into it kind of round robin style. If she believes that about this dude, why doesn't she believe that about me? I'm not out to hurt Alyssa Milano or any trans person or any LGBT person. She only believes this about people who are on her side of the political aisle. So let's make that clear real quick. She says, I'm everything and so are you, Kirk. And the backlash was swift and immediate. People started stomping her into the ground on Twitter because you're not allowed to say the things that she said. She'd stepped outside of her echo chamber. She was saying things that they didn't want to hear. Now, what I want to point out about this is because here's George M. Johnson. He sports the blue check mark. And no offense to that, I do too, but whatever. He says, no, you're an advocate. Be okay with that. This isn't the way to say you are with us. You can't fake an experience you don't have. You don't navigate any space like these groups. This is the I don't see color approach, which is oppression and erasure. Now, I have to point out here that this is the same group of people who says a grown man with male parts can say one morning, I'm a woman, and he gets to come into the bathroom where me and my daughters are, or the locker room where we're changing if we're at a public swimming place or something like that. They believe that guy has the right to say he's something that he's not, but Alyssa Milano can't. And that's where their argument falls apart. If Alyssa Milano cannot say she is a trans person or a gay man or a black woman, if she can't say those things, first of all, somebody better tell Rachel Dolezal. Second of all, then how dare they say that a transgendered man, a man who thinks he's a woman one day and thinks he's not the next, or thinks he's a woman every day from here on out, I don't care what the affliction is, he cannot say that if he's not actually a woman, if she can't say that she's a lesbian black woman. Do you see where this is going? They've created such an intricate web of deception around everything that they believe that they can't even keep it straight. These people actually are on Twitter arguing, I think it's still going on, tons of people supporting trans people, people of color, immigrants, lesbians, gay men, victims, disabled people, victims, is all well and good. Claiming to be them just because you love them is just sort of asinine and perverts the idea of being an ally. I support disabled people. Doesn't mean I'm disabled. That's Rob Gavagan, another blue check marker. Here's what's interesting about what he just said. Don't transgendered people say, I love other transgender people, I want to be transgendered? Don't kids who are suffering from these explosions of in their friend groups where one says I'm transgendered and then they all become transgendered, aren't they simply trying to fit in with their group? Aren't they simply trying to be something that someone else is that they like and they're not? Isn't this the same situation we see? The entire transgender movement is built upon the fact that you can say to yourself, today I feel like X or Y or Z or a giraffe, whatever. I feel like an alien, like the story last week of the people having parts of their body lopped off so they can look more like an alien. Anyone who feels like anything can say they are that thing, and they are that thing. And if you dare say no, you're a bigot, you're a homophobe, you're a transphobe, anything they can make up to demean your opinion for saying, I just don't believe what you're saying. I believe my lying eyes. And that's where we have to sit. We have to keep bashing this thing down to the ground because the truth matters. This is an important story because, well, first of all, the whole victimology mantra, it means you have to say to people, here's what's wrong with you. Notice how he says you're supporting these people. He names them all off. Then he says claiming to be them just because you love them is just sort of asinine. So her role is that of an ally, and she's not allowed to change her mind. What if Alyssa Milano really did think she was one of those people or wanted to be? Why can't she be, since everyone else gets to be what they want, except the allies, except Republicans, except anyone who's not in their little particular silo? It just doesn't make any sense. So you go on, and it's just more people. This woman works at South by Southwest, XXSW, that huge conference that just went on. I'm confident that there are better ways to show solidarity than to claim identities that do not belong to you. I mean, that one is so good on its face. I just wish this woman, Blair. So are you saying that it's not okay for a man to claim an identity that doesn't belong to him because a man is a man is a man down to the genetic level? He cannot be a woman. We know that men cannot be women. They can dress up like them. They can have their bodies chemically and physically altered. But at the genetic level, that is still a man. Now, saying that can get you booted off Twitter, booted off of, all kinds of social media platforms. But this person is saying that she's claiming identities that do not belong to her. But how does she get it to belong to her? I thought all you had to do was just say it. I thought all you had to do was just utter it with your lips and you were that identity. It's actually not that woke or empowering, says Beth, another blue check marker, or empowering for others for you to declare yourself a marginalized identity when you aren't. Come on, dude. Well, she just misgendered her. I understand the spirit of this comment, but claiming you are part of a marginalized group that you're not a part of is harmful in so many ways. Aren't women a marginalized group? I'm not a part of that. I'm a woman. I'm not a part of that. I don't claim that victimology. But according to liberals, women are a marginalized group. Alyssa Milano is a woman. So if she's a woman, she's a part of marginalized groups, and she can claim to be a part of any other marginalized group as long as she claims it publicly and does so in good faith. And that's what she was doing here. She was being a friend. So then it leads into this guy. He uses some profanity, and he also introduces this new term, LGBTQIA. So he says, this is the kind of bleep that makes straight people think they get to claim the A in LGBTQIA, the A standing for ally. So again, we have our little flow chart, and I'll see if I can find it over the break. The flow chart where, you know, everything at the bottom says racist, and the only way you're not a racist is, you know, there's only one path to not being a racist, and it's so difficult to get down, you can't get there. And that's what we're seeing here. So while this is going on, we have this kind of crazy story from the VA, and I see it's 1:44. I don't think we have time to get to it right now. We only have about a minute left. We'll get to that audio shortly, but I'm pointing this story out and connecting them two together. Fort Wayne Veterans Administration Hospital takes steps to ensure that Christianity doesn't receive special treatment. So they're stripping all the symbols out of the chapel because, you know, Islam doesn't have chapels. They have mosques. Other faiths don't have chapels. Christianity has chapels. They have the chapel there, and they're doing this, taking the crosses out, taking the Bibles and putting them in storage because people are going there to pray who aren't Christians, and they feel like that's not fair to them, that the Christian chapel has displays that reflect Christianity. So while you have this lunacy, this literal mental it's like mental gymnastics, mind-bendingly, mind-numbingly stupid things happening over here on Twitter with Alyssa Milano, just trying to be a friend to these victims. In real life, at Veterans Administration hospitals where people are dying and they need God, they need a savior, they're stripping the very tools and mechanisms by which they can find God, the Bibles, out of the spaces to accommodate snowflakes from other religions. I mean, it just doesn't get much better than that on a Monday, right? We'll be back with Burt Folsom right after this.
Here's Walker Wildman for Redeem Clean Laundry Products.
Not only do you get a great product and you get to obviously clean your clothes, get the stains out and use a multi-surface cleaner to clean your countertops and use the dryer sheets. You're doing all of this and the money's going to support the work of American Family Association.
Redeem Clean Laundry Products were developed by AFA supporters Len Ingram and Jim Duncan to assist in funding the mission of the American Family Association. Redeem Clean products work as well as or better than other products on the market. They're environmentally safe, biodegradable, and they're made right here in the United States.
The great thing about Redeem Clean is not only is the product great, but it goes to support a great cause, and that is the work of American Family Association.
For clean laundry and a cleaner society, it's Redeem Clean. Visit redeemclean.afastore.net.
Hi, I'm Crawford Loritz with a legacy moment. Now, I'll never win an award for patience, but I have learned the hard way that patience and effectiveness are the best of friends. For example, when I was in high school, I struggled with math, primarily because I didn't want to take the time to follow the steps that would lead me to the right answers. It wasn't a problem of ability. It really was a problem of patience. Steps are very important. Some things are too important to be rushed. There's too much at stake. I've seen ministries waste a lot of money, churches waste a lot of resources. People end up being used because leadership wasn't patient enough and didn't take the time to bring into consideration all that was there on the table, all the issues in front of them. Now, I'm not talking about a lack of courage here, nor am I talking about making excuses for not moving out, but I'm talking about the stewardship responsibility of doing the best we can with what we have for the honor and glory of God. There is some wisdom for us in Proverbs chapter 21, verse 5. The plans of the diligent lead surely to advantage, but everyone who is hasty comes surely to poverty. There are two principles that are very obvious in this verse. One is, diligent planning is your friend. It's not unspiritual to plan. Then number two, haste and impatience are your enemy. To rush out there and just do it because you say, I got the right idea, let's go for it, let's get out there, could spell devastation. Well, here's what I want you to remember today. If you have something on your heart to do, take the time to do it well. Haste is the father of failure.
Crawford Loritz is senior pastor of Fellowship Bible Church in suburban Atlanta, Georgia. For more information, go to livingalegacy.org. livingalegacy.org.
Welcome back to Stacy on the Right on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the program. It's my pleasure to welcome our next guest to the show. It is Burt Folsom. He's a distinguished fellow at Hillsdale College. Thank you, Burt, for joining us today again on the program.
Stacy, it's good to be with you today.
So this subject, the textbooks, U.S. history textbooks, it's not just U.S. history textbooks, but this is super important because a lot of parents, you're busy paying tuition, you're busy working, you're busy trying to support your student in whatever way that you can. They're off at college, and you've carefully chosen this, higher education institution. You've spent the time, you're now spending the money, and to hear that your child is being taught socialism or many of these very un-American things, it's just like, what are parents supposed to do? Tell us exactly what the situation is with this U.S. history textbook.
Right. It's very bad, Stacy, and the way you framed it, I think, is very accurate because parents have no way of knowing usually what their kids are, what their children are learning in college, or in the case not learning, or what false things they're learning. I teach American history and have taught for years at Hillsdale College, and fortunately Hillsdale is not caught up in the textbook problem because we use primary source readers. We use where we get the original sources by whether it's John Winthrop or Franklin Roosevelt or Ronald Reagan or who. But the typical textbook is a historian's treatment of the past, and the textbooks are notoriously biased, with the exception of Larry Schweikart's Patriots History of the United States. The textbooks lean far to the left and often are indoctrinating students in agnosticism, indoctrinating them in socialism. That's the one that specifically has concerned me with the textbook bias study that I did.
So textbook bias study, that indicates that you probably looked at a lot of different books. What number of books, or what can you tell us about the study that you conducted?
Right. I looked at many, many books. The one I focused on primarily was the best-selling American History College textbook. It's also used heavily in high school classes, especially for advanced placement. And that book is entitled The American Pageant. The authors are David Kennedy and Elizabeth Cohen. And that textbook has been out for decades. And it has many biases. For example, one to focus on is the rise of the United States to being a world power. After the Civil War, the United States was a second-rate power. 50 years later, the United States was a first-rate power. The textbook, The American Pageant, says it was primarily due to corruption. Now, I don't know how you get rich by being corrupt, but that's sort of the emphasis that they have, instead of emphasizing the entrepreneurs, Stacy, who helped the United States rise to greatness, whether it's Cornelius Vanderbilt, the first American to be worth $100 million and was so successful in railroads and in steamships, or John D. Rockefeller in oil, or Andrew Carnegie in steel. All of these industries, America became supreme, and they did it by having entrepreneurs by producing good products at competitive prices in a free economy. And so those economies abroad that had gone to early versions of socialism fell way behind the United States. The textbook, The American Pageant, fails to mention that, fails to credit the entrepreneurs, and thus is a real problem. We have that study, by the way, available at www.trueamericanhistory.us. So students can just free look online and see the biases in that textbook if they happen to have it assigned to them by their professors or their high school teachers.
What would be awesome is if American kids all across the country read your website. And I'll give it again. It's trueamericanhistory.net. If kids all across .us. Sorry about that. I wrote that down wrong. Trueamericanhistory.us. If kids would just start challenging their instructors on that and keep coming back with the truth on it, and that's what has to happen. In addition to that, parents have to push back. Parents who are funding these, educations for their kids, you have to reach out to these universities and say, I'm sorry, why are you using this heavily biased textbook? And if they say, well, that's just the one we've always used, well, that's not the payment I'm making. I'm not making payments for that. I'm not writing out tuition checks for this kind of indoctrination. And you made a statement, Burt, and if you're just tuning into the show, I'm speaking with Burt Folsom, Distinguished Fellow, Hillsdale College, about his study that he did of higher education in the U.S. history textbook realm, where he found that these kids, all kids, so it's foreign kids too, it's exchange students, it's students who come from abroad to get a U.S. Education, from our universities. They're all learning that America basically stole everything that we have. And you said you don't get prosperous by being corrupt. Well, that's usually true, except if you're in the realm of politics. And if you look at who's controlled U.S. education, right, Democrats have gotten wealthy through corruption and graft, theft, lying, and hoodwinking the American people. And so it's natural that they would think, because that's how they became successful, that that's how America became successful, and want to convince kids that that's what happened as well. And kids who learn that only want to hurt the country that they're living in because they think it's bad. But they're not looking at the fact that most of these kids, they're going to college at a campus that is the envy of every other country on the planet. America is known for having the most beautiful college campuses anywhere in the world. And most of these kids they're receiving money from the government if they're disadvantaged. If they're not disadvantaged, they have scholarship money or their parents are helping them pay. Worst of the worst, they're borrowing every penny of it, but that our system enables you to borrow your entire college education and put it on, a payment plan for the rest of your life. There's really nothing you can say about the U.S. education system that would cause a student to believe that, other than the fact that we've allowed it to become perverted by indoctrination.
Well, and Stacy, you put your finger on it. And so many of these, the interesting thing is, so many of these colleges, which have gone in a negative direction, a very liberal direction, were started by some of these entrepreneurs. That's the wild thing. Vanderbilt University, started by Cornelius Vanderbilt, has shifted far to the left. One of the tragedies is that the universities are not operating according to the desires of its founders. They're moving politically in an opposite direction. I'm pleased at Hillsdale College because we take no federal aid. And so Hillsdale has been somewhat exempt from some of those changes. No federal aid, and we've been integrated since our founding in 1844, and also coeducational. We are the second integrated coeducational institution in the country, founded in 1844, and have not had the pressures of government aid and government money, where you have to pacify government bureaucrats. And it's a natural shift to the left. Hillsdale College has never had to do that, so that we are able to give college education of high quality that other institutions simply can't do.
And I echo those sentiments. I think Hillsdale it's by far the standard bearer. So I'm in a huge book club of women, and from moms who have adult kids all the way down to moms who have like 7 and 8-year-old kids. And the bulk of us are in that mid-range where we have maybe a high schooler or two left, and then we have kids in college. And all of us considered Hillsdale. It's one of the resources. I get the Imprimis newsletter. A lot of us refer to Hillsdale College, and a few of the women are graduates, and their parents graduated from Hillsdale. And so we often, Hillsdale creeps into the conversation. But Hillsdale, Liberty University, and also there are others, Hard Work U down in the Lake of the Ozarks.
Oh, that's a wonderful.
Yeah, these are great schools, but we need more of them. But in the absence of more of these schools cropping up, it is incumbent upon parents, whether your kid is borrowing their education or you're paying for it out of, literally writing a check out every month. You have to be aware that this is what's going on. And when your kids start coming home at Thanksgiving and Christmas and spring break and saying things about how horrible America is, it's not that they're talking about this while they're video gaming on the weekend. They're getting this stuff straight from their professor, and they're having to be tested on it. It's being drummed into them in these classes.
You're completely right. Stacy, you are very involved with your children.
I'm totally plugged into them. They might want me to unplug a little, but I'm plugged into little jokers. I'm into them.
I'll give you an example. Most students say the United States is responsible for many of the world's problems. After World War II, not only did the United States make it so we had a free world after World War II, but Europe was in a state of such depression, and they'd had famine. They hadn't been able to plant crops. The United States, at our expense, sent food to feed millions of Germans, not even Englishmen, which we did, and Frenchmen, but those who were on the other side, the Nazis, Germans, citizens there, to keep them from starving. We saved millions of lives, and we did it by having to run a deficit to some extent in our federal budget. Although we made some good decisions, we lowered the tax rates and got the revenue up, so that it wasn't as bad as it could have been. But nonetheless, the United States, out of our own generosity, fed the defeated nations of Europe and also Japan, and plus our allied nations. I don't know in history of any nation that's ever done that before.
Yeah, and so that's a fantastic story, Burt, but there are so many others like that where America said, like the AIDS epidemic in Africa. I happen to know that U.S. president after U.S. president has authorized and reauthorized funding to not just to help the people in Africa battle the AIDS epidemic, but to do research there to try to eliminate AIDS as a disease, and to figure out the causes for communication. I mean, we're talking about just billions of dollars in research and aid that have come from America, and it wasn't a problem for us at the time. At the time, it was something that was only happening there. When it began to, crop up in the United States, we spent even more research dollars on it, public education campaigns, sent scientists there. And part of it is obviously you want to eradicate something before it comes to your shores. It's here now. We have people in America who live with AIDS, right. many thousands of people who've died. But it's just over and over again, when we see a problem somewhere, we'll send some of our people over, or we'll send money and aid or physical items, like you talked about the food. We do that because we want to stop bad things from happening. We want to stop people from dying. That is not what we see from corrupt nations. We don't hear these huge stories about China. They have a billion people there. They have they're very wealthy. They could do humanitarian aid on a scale that would be just outstanding, but they don't. They don't do that at all.
They don't do that at all. That's a very good example of the United States activities in trying to halt the AIDS epidemic in Africa, and China's refusal to do anything, to even notice. Mm-hmm. They would be surprised, I'm sure, the Chinese, that you would even make a suggestion that they might do something.
Mm-hmm. Because it's antithetical to their government. They're communists, and the people that live there, unlike here where we're citizens and we can choose to be a citizen or we can renounce our citizenship, which I remember looking this up a few years ago, Burt, and realizing that just under 4,000 people a year, sometimes it's low, it's like 1,700. Sometimes it's really high, like a little over 4,000. But about 4,000 people a year, give or take, every year renounce their U.S. citizenship and become citizens of another country. But that's 4,000 out of 325 million. In China, right, citizens that want to even vacation abroad, and if they look like they're too happy about going on vacation, their government will say, if you leave, we'll kill all your family members, or your family members are going to the worker camp, which means they're going to be killed. Or if you leave and you stay gone too long, they'll communicate with their citizens, you've been in, say, America too long. If you don't come back, your entire extended family will just wipe them off the face of the earth. That's the Chinese way. Look, so the idea that we're out there doing all these wrong things, it's just not true. You know what we could do, Burt? Because I'm into being real. We have the military might to take over a whole bunch of other countries if we wanted to. And I've joked around about this. What we should do is a big, huge fixer-upper like on HGTV. We should use our military might to subjugate the entire South American hemisphere. Just take the whole thing over. Rout out all of the drug dealers and the MS-13, all of the gangs. Just eliminate them. Wipe them from the face of the earth. And then just redo their governments and create South America, like literally South United States of America. Each one of those countries would be a state. Break up the states that are too big to be states. The countries that are too large to be a viable state, break them up, install governors and the same system of government that we have. Give everybody down there a part of the Constitution, make them American citizens, give them passports, driver's licenses, start American schools down there. Just take it all over. The whole thing would be America. And tell the Canada people, if you want to be Americans too, throw in, get rid of Trudeau, you can be the state of Canada. And just be done with all of this garbage with the people trying to come here.
If it weren't for the United States, I think all of the nations you described and many others would be pure rubble. The United States has been kind of a safety valve for the whole world. People to come here, and I'm talking about legal immigration. It's been bad with the illegal, but with the legal immigration, and then with the freedom of ideas, so that people who come here can then live lives they never could have lived abroad, which is why they want to come here. We have something to offer, and if they'll come here legally, it would be perfectly proper. But
and the ones that do come here legally send a third of Mexico's GDP is remittances from America. So even when we're not helping, and we do help billions of dollars, even when we're not helping, we're helping because the citizens are like, I got to send, I'm making like the same amount I would make in a whole year I make here in America in 1 month. I'm going to send a third of what I make to my family so they can live. So we're supporting them whether we're trying to or not. Right.
And all we have to do is in the classroom, I think, as far as history goes, is give the example after example of how we establish freedom, that 90% of the founders were Christians, that they were influenced by their Christianity in setting up the natural rights that went into the United States. And what happens when this unique experiment comes about? We become a center for the world in innovation, in prosperity. We get migrants, record numbers of migrants from all over, and we produce the standard of living that then ends up being exported to the other nations that you mentioned, who can tap into some of this and learn about it. And then the United States becomes really the center of freedom, the center of prosperity, and giving.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Burt, Folsom, I hear the music, distinguished fellow, Hillsdale College. Thank you so much for joining us today, and we'll talk again soon. And thank you for your study.
Thank you, Stacy.
All right, talk to you again soon. Have a great week. We'll be back with more right after this. Your calls at 866-963-2037. Stay there.
What does it take to be a sports success and a team player? Here's Pro Football Hall of Fame coach Tony Dungy with today's Uncommon Moment.
It was never too late for Hall of Famer and legend John Elway. As a quarterback, Elway holds the record for most fourth-quarter comebacks in football history. His most memorable moment came in the 1986 AFC Championship game when he led the Broncos on a comeback drive of 98 yards to take the lead in the final seconds of the game. But after 3 painful Super Bowl losses, some thought Elway choked in big games. At age 37, he led the Denver Broncos to victory in Super Bowl 32, and again the following year with back-to-back Super Bowl wins. With uncommon skill, leadership, and sheer unwillingness to give up, John Elway earned his nickname, the Comeback Kid.
Tony Dungy, best-selling author of Quiet Strength and the Uncommon book series. Discover more at CoachDungy.com.
Stephen Black.
Because my molester spoke to me while being molested that I had somehow caused this. I had a deep sense of darkness and shame. The thing that I see in others is ministering to them, this deep sense of shame. And that's what brings about healing once that is discovered, that their innocence was taken from them.
The Marriage, Family, and Life Conference is coming June 20th through the 22nd. Learn more and register at urbanfamilytalk.com.
Chris Brooks. A lot of parents raised their kids in church and did, in kind of scare quotes, everything right. And now they're looking at junior or sis or their son or daughter who's walked away from the faith and said, your God is not my God. And they're wanting to know, what do we do to reach them?
Tuned in to Equipped, weekday afternoons at 12 Central on Urban Family Talk.
I'm Chad Pergram with the Speaker's Lobby. Senate Republicans are chatting about a third nuclear option to accelerate the confirmation of some lower-tier nominations. At issue are the 30 hours of debate available to senators after the Senate halts a filibuster. Republicans hope to trim this time frame to just 2 hours on many nominations. The Senate lowered the bar to end filibusters on all nominations thanks to two nuclear options, one initiated by Democrats in 2013, the other by Republicans in 2017. What we're discussing now is a precedent change in the Senate, not a rules change. The Senate has 44 standing rules. However, the book of precedents is voluminous. It takes 67 votes to end a filibuster on a rules change, but establishing a new precedent requires but a simple majority. Initiating the precedent change requires the Senate to wind its way into a particular parliamentary cul-de-sac. Only then can Senate leaders launch a parliamentary arpeggio to establish a new precedent. Posture requires a failed vote to end debate on a nominee, but that hasn't happened yet this year, and until it does, the very special parliamentary posture from which to launch the nuclear option is unavailable. Chad Pergram, Fox News.
You can download episodes of Stacy on the Right from the podcast page on AFR.net or UrbanFamilyTalk.com. Now, back to the show on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
Well, this is one of any number of one-factor explanations as to why everyone doesn't have the same outcome. 100 years ago, it was genetics. At other times and places, it was exploitation. But again, these are ideas that sound plausible. But when you do research, you discover that everywhere you turn, there are 1,000 reasons why people don't turn out the same. It goes right down to the family. In the first chapter of this book, I point out that the firstborn has higher IQs than his siblings. And in later life has more achievements. Among astronauts, for example, of the 29 astronauts in the Apollo program that put a man on the moon, 22 were either the firstborn or an only child. Now, if you can't get equality among people born to the same parents and raised under the same roof, why in the world would you think you're going to get it among people who've had such different histories and cultures around the world?
So do you hear what he just said? Thomas Sowell is breaking down the truth of all of this nonsense about outcomes. The fact is, we're never going to have equal outcomes. So just be done with the whining about it. Now, if someone is looking at their own results, I mean, don't we all do this? You look at something that you're working on and you're like, I'm just not cutting the mustard here, or I don't like the results I'm getting. You know, for a lot of us, we look at it and say, yeah, I would be doing a lot better at this if only blah, blah, blah. And if you say that to yourself, goodness knows I've said it. You got to stop. You got to pump the brakes really hard right there in that moment and stop and say, whoa, I just blame some other entity, person, organization, group, whatever, for my own results. What you have to do really, if you really want to know why you're where you are in any area, you have to sit down and pick apart your actions. You have to literally, you might have to sit down and say, what are my habits for this entire day? And every day I do this. Every day I get up and I do this, and this. You write down the habits for the whole day. You might have to track your habits for a week or 2 weeks. A week is usually enough. You look at it and you examine what you're doing, and in the area that you're talking about, whether it's work or a project that you're working on or something with your kids, you will see glaring, obvious holes, areas in which you are either doing the wrong thing or you're doing nothing when you should be doing something, and then you can address the issue. And what you will find is very little of your circumstances are directly attributable to some other person, unless you're talking about like your spouse, someone that lives in the house with you, that person can derail your life. But in the absence of a person in your life who is, maybe addicted to drugs or sick or having something that is just like an upending, never-ending saga that you're having to deal with, if you don't have that going on and you're talking about something specific you're working with that's not working the way you want it to, yes, even your relationship with your kids, yes, even the way your kids behave, then you have to break it down. You cannot say, this is that person's fault. This is that. You can't say it until you have literally written down every one of your habits, your reactions, really thought it through honestly. You don't go numb. You don't go get some ice cream. I'm telling on myself. You don't go turn the TV on and avoid it. You have to sit down and look at it and examine it and say, okay, wow, I didn't know every time my child did this, my reaction was to do that. The more effective thing to do would be almost anything else. And that's just an example, but in every area of our life, we can take that action. Now, none of us are perfect. None of us are ever going to get through every area of our life and then be done at the end of the week and be like, well, now I'm perfect. Boom. That's not the way this thing works. But you can definitely improve in areas. You can make radical changes in areas, changes you didn't think were possible, changes you currently don't think are possible. But as long as you're blaming the outcome on someone else, you can't change anything. You cannot change anything. If the responsibility lies with someone else, you have to go to that person. Just think how silly it would be for you to go to someone else and say, you know, the reason why I'm not getting the promotion I want is because of you. So can you tell me if you're going to stop doing X, Y, and Z? If you're in a dead-end situation, if you're in a work environment where you can't get a promotion because the person that you're working for doesn't like you and has told you you're not going to get promoted here, you're going to stick right there, that's an indication that you need to leave that place, that you need to move on. You need to apply. You don't quit that minute. You first find your new thing and then submit your resignation and leave on a good note, even with that person that is, you know, the thorn in your side. And you go to the next spot and you start working and putting your best foot forward there. But it's never that the entire situation is wholly and incumbent on someone else unless you're an infant or a small child. But once children start getting to the age of responsibility where they can make choices for themselves, even in situations where they're not getting an optimal home environment, they can choose to make decisions that impact their lives later on, meaning the responsibility lies with you. It lies with us. So I promised we would listen to this. I just can't get over the fact that you would have a chapel and not have any Bibles in it. Even if they said, you know what, Muslim people come in here and they want to pray because their family members are, you know, in the VA hospital. So let's have, you know, a Quran available, you know, on this table. I just don't understand why you have to take the Bibles and put them away. Actually, I do. You know why they have to take the Bibles out of the space? Not aside from the fact that they offend people of other faiths. Because the Bible is the only book that when people read it, they're changed. Because the Word of God is true and it is absolutely able to change people's minds about whatever they're practicing. I don't care if you're a Scientologist. You start reading the Bible with any regularity and you're going to come to know a couple of things. If you choose to reject God after that, that's on you. It's always on you. But you are not going to read the Word of God and not be changed. And that's why these people are, you know, they're dumb. They're idiotic. They're operating on behalf of Satan, but they're putting the Bibles out of reach because, God forbid, you are in the VA hospital and you're tired of bowing down 5 times a day for nothing. And you go in the chapel and you pick a Bible up and you read that God sent his son, Jesus Christ, to die on the cross. And he is promised all of us healing. God forbid you say, you know what? I just want healing. I'm going to pray over my family member. I'm going to pray the words out of this scripture. And then you begin to believe that. God forbid people go into a chapel, read the word of God, and actually start to believe it. That's what this is about. But it's number 3.
Those who come to the VA Medical Center on Lake Avenue during hours of operation can pop into a chapel for prayer or worship anytime the facility is open. For years, copies of the Bible and other symbols of the Christian faith, such as crosses, were on display in the chapel. Officials with the local VA confirmed within the last week or so those items have been put in storage. Public Affairs Officer Thomas Blackburn released a statement saying VA chapels are maintained as religiously neutral so that all visitors may seek comfort in the chapel as they see fit. Items that pertain to certain faiths are available during scheduled services. This is standard practice for all VA hospitals. Why Christian symbols were only recently removed is not completely clear, though the Department of Veterans Affairs in the past has given local VAs some discretion in this area. We caught up with Pat Frazier at the Waynedale American Legion post, where a POW MIA display is set up featuring an open Bible. He says veterans coming to the VA want access to something similar.
We never know in our time of need when we're going to need some peace. And my point being, it should be readily available.
It's an expression of the separation between church and state.
Muslim believers in some cases hold that religious symbols can distract from prayer or worship, especially when they are from a faith different from their own. And there's this.
I think it's more comfortable for me to pray in a place where I feel
Who
that this place is not
cares?
favoring anyone.
Who cares
more
about
than
your
the other.
comfort?
The Department of Veterans Affairs is quick to point out religious neutrality is standard procedure in many non-VA facilities now as well. Jeff Newmeyer, ABC 21.
So it's a religious facility now. It's not a chapel, although it is a chapel. I mean, don't try me. I know I don't remember everything. My sister is the repository of all knowledge in our family, but I do remember that every place we ever lived when I was growing up on military installations all over the world, every place we ever went to had a on-base chapel, a post chapel, depending Air Force, Army, whatever. They always had one, and it always had Bibles in it. And the Catholics were there for 1 or 1.5 hours every Sunday, and the Protestants would have a service or two, and they had a space for Jewish people to worship. If you were Jewish and you were on active duty, you had space in that same building. You had a set time every Saturday, Friday night, whatever the custom was. You trying to tell me now that it's a religious facility? What is that? What is a religious facility? Miss me with that. People of faith, Christians specifically, need a place with Bibles in it that they can go to and call upon the name of the Lord so that they can have him meet their needs, especially in these emotionally charged circumstances where their loved ones are ill and dying. That is the responsibility of the chapel in the facility. I cannot right now with these ignorant people and their feelings. Please miss me, Muslim guy, with your need not to see a Bible laying around. If you want to go pray, bring your rug, throw it down in the hallway and do what you got to do, but you don't have the right to dictate what's in the chapel where Christians are supposed to be going. I mean, I don't get it. Let's go to the phones. Michael in Alabama. Hey, Michael, welcome to the program.
Hey, Stacy.
Hi.
Hey, you really hit a chord with me on when you were talking about Alyssa Milano saying, she could be gay, she could be lesbian, she could be black. It's really funny to me that really brings out the hypocrisy of the left. So get this. I'm a white man, okay?
Okay.
So
today, I mean, you could be anything.
Today, this minute. I can say that I'm gay in a few minutes.
Yeah.
I can say pretty much anything. But let me open a taco shop. Because I'm white, I can't cook tacos because that's cultural appropriation, isn't it?
Oh, I forgot about that. Okay. Well, let's see how we can make this work for you. Because Michael, we got to make this work for you. Because I think in among the rules the liberals have laid out, there are some loopholes that we could use to our advantage. So you could be, if you wanted to make the taco shop work for you, you could be trans and you could be also Latino, Latinx. So you'd be trans Latinx, and the trans would trump the cultural appropriation because trans is at the top of the heap. So if you said you were trans and opened a taco shop, you'd be fine. Just put a rainbow colored flag in the window and you'd still be able to do that.
See, all I had to do was call Stacy.
I'm telling you, we can work this out for any person who wants to call in and be someone else. We can figure out a way to make it happen. You just have to adopt an addition. So you need more than one victim group. If you're just doing one, that's not enough. Sometimes you have to double them up like coupons,
I got you. Hey, I got one other thing to say.
What?
President Trump. I voted for President Trump. When I voted for President Trump, I basically signed a contract that he made with the American people.
Mm-hmm.
On the first item on that list, on that contract, was term limits. I really am upset. I'm upset at him because I signed a contract. He's not holding that end of the bargain. If we had term limits, he wouldn't have the problems that he's having right now with Congress because most of them would be gone.
That's true.
And that's all I got to say. And
all right.
Thank you for your service, girl.
Thank you for calling in, Michael. I appreciate that. Okay. He makes a good point about the term limits. And I know a lot of freedom advocates will say, well, it's up to the American people to get rid of the elected ones who have been in office too long. It's as simple as not voting for them again. But Congress has a re-election rate of 82%. So it's not working out that way. And I don't know what the answer is other than public information campaigns, but it's kind of hard to do when the left owns the media and doesn't really give a fair shot to that. It's funny. Jacob in Alabama. Hey, thanks for calling the show.
How you doing, Sister? How's everything?
Pretty good.
All right. Now, that last caller, I got something for him. Now, I'm going to say this in my
in a New York, Brooklyn kind of way.
Okay.
He needs to have affirmative action.
What would happen? What would that make happen?
Affirmative action. We would allow him to have the tacos there, but he has to have affirmative action.
Ah, okay. So if he has affirmative action in his hiring policies, he'd be allowed to have the taco stand. You know, I see this audience is smart. If we got together, Jacob, we could figure out a way for every American to claim an additional identity or two and get around all these barriers that are being erected by leftists, where you can't, like, white women can't wear hoop earrings, but you can, if you're a lesbian, you can wear the hoop earrings and culturally appropriate. See, if you just add on a victim status, you can do almost anything.
Oh, yeah. It's hilarious because the one thing that, I'm a missionary as well, but one thing the Lord put on my heart for maybe the last couple of years, do not lose your sense of humor. It's a weapon. It's a two-edged sword. It's what was downloaded to you when you came to the earth. It's called joy. Don't ever lose that.
We got to keep laughing.
You'll always have perspective. Always. I mean, because some of this stuff is so ridiculously funny.
It's just crazy. It's crazy. Jacob, thank you for calling the show, and thank you for adding to the laughs. We really need them. I just encourage you, and I know you'll have someone who's totally triggered when you say these things, but, you know, go with peace. Go with joy. Smile. And if someone says you're culturally appropriating, say them, but today I'm also, and then add on whatever victim status you want, and you'll have the right to do whatever it is that you're doing. You had the right before. You know, you're free to do whatever you want anyway. But if we have to play their game, let's play it and laugh, right? If you're leaving us now, God bless you from the heartland. If you're sticking around, onenewsnow.com news and information is up next. Keep it here.
Urban Family Talk.
Always stay up to date with the latest in the culture war from the news team of One News Now. Use the One News Now mobile app. It neatly categorizes news and articles from the One News Now website in an easy-to-find format. You can read the stories, watch videos, and conveniently share any news story. It's now available for download from your phone's app store.
Truth, wisdom, empowerment. Urban Family Talk, a ministry of the American Family Association.
American Family News, I'm Rusty Pugh. Democrats are criticizing President Trump's 2020 budget request, which seeks $8.6 billion in new border wall funding and cuts non-military spending by $2.7 trillion over the next decade. Rachel Sutherland reports.
Democratic leaders on the Hill are raising the specter of another government shutdown. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer warned that if President Trump tries to force Congress to pay for the wall again, federal workers could face another round of furloughs. In a joint statement, the leaders referred to the recent 35-day shutdown, writing Congress refused to fund his wall and he was forced to admit defeat. The chairman of the House Budget Committee calling the spending plan dangerous. In Washington, Rachel Sutherland, Fox News.
Investigators have recovered the flight data recorders from the Ethiopian Airlines flight crash site. NBC's Sarah Harmon.
Everyone is hoping that the discovery of those black boxes will give investigators the data they need to determine what went wrong, why this new Boeing plunged from the sky.
8 Americans were among the 157 people killed. Georgia and Tennessee have joined other states in taking up or passing heartbeat bills. Chris Woodward spoke to one pro-life group that thinks lawmakers might want to focus on other bills.
A heartbeat bill bans abortion once a baby's heartbeat is detected, typically around the 6-week mark. Supporters of heartbeat bills argue they not only protect the child, but also the health and safety of mothers, as abortions are more dangerous for them the further they are in pregnancy. Still, Clark Forsyth of Americans United for Life sees issues.
Heartbeat bills have a very, very steep hill to climb to ever be enforced for a day. The Supreme Court has refused to hear first trimester prohibitions from Arkansas and North Dakota, There's no sign right now that the court will hear or is interested in hearing a first trimester prohibition.
Forsyth adds that a state could end up paying attorney's fees to Planned Parenthood and its attorneys should the court come down against a first trimester prohibition.
Legislators should, they should look at ultrasound informed consent laws, stopping government funding of abortion, stopping government endorsement of abortion. There are other bills that can be passed and go into effect soon and have a positive impact.
I'm Chris Woodward.
The delinquencies for payback on student loans has surged to a new high, hitting $166.4 billion in the fourth quarter last year. An education research associate uncovers some of the reasons why this is happening.
Mary Claire Amsalem of the Heritage Foundation says a student loan is considered delinquent after nothing is paid on it for 90 days or longer. She says there are a number of reasons why the problem continues to soar.
One might be that these students are unemployed, which begs the question, are colleges adequately preparing their students for work after college that would enable them to pay off these loans? A second cause might be that these loans are simply too high, that the cost of college is not commensurate with the salaries that students are earning.
Amsalem points out an obvious solution would be to significantly roll back the federal student loan program and open up student loans to private lenders.
If we have a competitive private student loan market, this pushes college prices down and allows students to take out loans for a good price for exactly the education that they will be receiving.
The student loan debt now stands at nearly $1.5 trillion, more than Americans owe on mortgages or on credit cards, according to Amsalem. I'm Bob Kellogg.
More people will have heart attacks today. Lisa Carter explains.
Every Monday after daylight saving time goes into effect, there's around a 24% jump in heart attack cases reported at hospitals. Researchers say it's likely an effect of losing an hour of sleep when the clocks are set forward the night before. Just an hour lost can have a detrimental effect. In contrast, there's a 21% drop in reported heart attacks after the clocks go back in the fall. The data is published in the BMJ. Lisa Carter, NBC News Radio.
For American Family News, I'm Muskie Pugh.
Family is an institution set forth by God, one man and one woman for life, with the outflow being children produced by that union. It's obvious to all that there is an attack on the family in our country, and especially on fathers. Whether it's the cycle of sin that persists in our families or the pressure from our government to exclude men from being intimately involved, the strategic battle is on for the souls of men. Join us in the battle to strengthen fatherhood. UrbanFamilyTalk.com.
She's sharp, pointed, and insightful. This is Stacy on the Right on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
Two of the world's biggest polluters are in fact making the globe greener. In these images gathered by NASA, you can see an increase in foliage in China and in India. The greening effect is mainly due to ambitious tree planting in China and intensive farming in both countries.
You know, a debate is a very carefully orchestrated thing. I go on Tucker Carlson, I go on Fox and Friends. It can get uncomfortable. As they say, you don't need to persuade your friends, you need to persuade people who disagree with you. So I would have made a different decision.
I think it's important to get all the evidence before we make a decision. The president's obviously said he would be very disappointed if that's the direction North Korea were going in, but I don't want to get out in front of the facts we actually know at this point.
And now, Stacy Washington.
Oh, I'm laughing because that story about the greenhouse. Welcome to the show. Stacy Washington, host of Stacy on the Right here on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk. Great to have you with us for hour two. We're going to chat with Dr. Craig Albert, former president of the Georgia Political Science Association and graduate director of Intelligence and Security Studies at Augusta University. We're going to talk foreign policy with him, specifically North Korea, and what impact national security discussions will have on the race in 2020. So the big kind of conversation here is, well, let's just run straight on down the line. I just started talking about this greenhouse gas study. I posted the link on Facebook, and it's like I found it on this Good News website. So India has planted all of these trees, and China as well. They've planted these trees not because they care about just solely about the environment, although they were told that their actions were destroying trees and they didn't have enough trees, and they were like measuring per capita how many trees each country has, and how many trees that each country should plant. And so India first was like, oh wow, so we don't have enough trees per capita, and they had all these campaigns where they discussed building trees to improve their country, and they just planted millions of trees, literally, and so did China. And part of it has to do with them wanting to grow more of their own food, wanting to have more self-sufficiency. But the other part of it is they just wanted to have a better reputation on how many trees they had in their country. So they did this. Now, lower down in the article, if you keep scrolling down, it says, something about how that it's not enough. Enough hasn't been done. And I just counter that with, human beings, when most nations, or I should say not most, but a lot of nations, when they're informed that they have an issue and they feel like it's something manageable that they can actually make a dent in, that they could take care of, they'll tackle it. So America's not the only nation on the planet that when we find out something's going on that we don't like, we try to, dive in. And so it's good news. And I hate the way people are acting. Well, it's not really having an impact on climate change. Well, I mean, it is and it isn't. First of all, if you believe in man-made global warming and the climate science debacle, then you have bigger problems than I can address here on this show. I'm not here to address your issues. I'm putting on a program that's informative and and so on and so forth. So that's not going to work. But what can happen is we can celebrate this development about the earth being greener, planting more trees on the planet than 20 years ago. China and India being the drivers behind that. Those are all great things to celebrate. So we also said we would discuss this good guy with the gun story, Second Amendment update. So you've got this robbery attempt. So let me set it up for you. It's in Everett. And this man, just two guys, they met at the South Everett Park and Ride, and they were meeting because one of them was going to sell the other one an iPhone. So they get there, and I guess they come to an agreement. So they drive over to the BECU, a credit union, and the two men, are basically trying to pull off this transaction. The intended buyer then pulls a fake gun and says, "Give me the phone. I'm not paying you for it." When the seller saw the fake gun, he pulls his own gun. Again, I'm calling it a fake gun because that's what we know now. But at the time, you've got the seller seeing the buyer with a gun in his hand and trying to stick him up. Now, if you're trained at all in firearms, you know that there's no guarantee that someone who's sticking you up with a firearm, once they get what they want from you, that they won't still shoot you. Once he sees the gun, he has every right to defend himself. He does not have to investigate and say, "Is that real? Do you have a permit for that? Did you buy that illegally off the street?" He doesn't have to do anything at that point. All he has to do is defend himself. And so that's what he did. He fired off a few rounds into the guy and put him in critical condition, called the police, and they showed up. Now, they have not decided whether they're going to arrest the shooter or charge him with anything. Investigators were collecting and reviewing evidence and reviewing surveillance footage from the story at the time that the reporters actually wrote the story. But there's been no additional information that's been made since Friday afternoon. And look, criminals are going to play stupid games and win stupid prizes. And that's what happened here. This is one of those ones where you have any regrets about what happened, other than the guy who said he was there to buy an iPhone should have just pulled out some money instead of the gun, and this wouldn't be a news story for us to discuss. Good guy with the gun wins out. He didn't get shot. He didn't get hurt. He still has his iPhone. He can still sell it to somebody else. That's how that is. We're also going to talk this hour about a teen dad who sued a clinic that aborted his baby, a baby he wanted, but the mom went ahead and had an abortion, and he's suing them. And the House AG chairman saying that requiring SNAP recipients to work is not going to happen. And before anybody gets their dander up and starts talking about how I'm always trying to make people work that don't, have the ability to work, the AG chairman and the Trump administration are trying to get people who are able-bodied, probably more able-bodied than me with all the stuff I got going on. They're walking around, they're talking, they're physically intact. They have no disabilities. And they're still receiving food stamp benefits. You're probably thinking, well, they have kids. No, they don't. We're talking about able-bodied single adults who went onto the welfare system under President Obama because he was into that kind of stuff. And now President Trump is saying, look, you can get the welfare, you can get the food stamps, whatever. You just need to work. So that might be 20 hours a week. It might be job training for 20 hours a week. But you're going to do something before we hand you a check with your able-bodied single self. And the Democrats are saying, nah, we got to let these able-bodied single people get welfare. How can you stand behind that as a Christian? How can you stand behind that as an American? How can you stand behind that as someone who's funding it? Because if you work, that's your money those able-bodied adults are getting. That's just like me saying, you know what, this whole working for, I don't want to work. I just want to go get me some welfare. But it doesn't apply to me because I'm not single and I have kids. I have children. So we're talking about single able-bodied adults. So you have to, in order for this analogy to work, it has to be someone you know that's single and able-bodied, suddenly saying, you know what, I would rather sit at home and play, what's that game? Fortnite. I'd rather sit at home and play Fortnite all day and collect a check and order pizzas with my food stamp card and, eat lobster and drink beer and let you pay for it. Would you be down with that? How many single adults do you know that are sitting at home getting welfare checks? Probably none if you're listening to this show. You probably don't know a one. Well, they're out there, and we need to put a stop to it. So, y'all, I did tweet out. Go on there and retweet if you're a Twitterer. I tweeted out about how I would totally take over South America. Not because I have a thing about taking over countries, but because they need something. Oh, my goodness. I'm still dealing with this cold. So now I want to pivot over to Senator Barrasso, who says that the Chicken Little, sky is falling approach of the Democrats is a problem. He doesn't want the Democrats to go down this road. He's a Democrat himself. It's number 5.
We just cannot allow ourselves to follow this Chicken Little, sky is falling approach of these socialist Democrats like Ocasio-Cortez and the presidential candidates on the Democrat side of the aisle. We cannot follow them over the cliff. That is going to hurt jobs, hurt people's ability to pay their mortgage, hurt our economy, hurt our nation in terms of national security. Some are very concerned with the position that the party has taken and the presidential candidates have taken. I think Nancy Pelosi is unnerved by this new group of Democrats.
So he's talking about the Chicken Little, sky is falling approach, and he's specifically, without saying any names, referring to Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez running around saying that everybody's going to die in 12 years. Anytime someone says everyone's going to die, that's when you should, okay, really? Is everyone going to die? Would everyone mean all Americans or just everybody on the planet? Because I love the way the client Scientologists and the people who believe in climate change believe that things we do in America are the sole driver for the weather on the entire planet. Or they treat it as if it's just the weather in America that's so horrible. Like when we have a natural disaster, they'll say, well, that's due to climate change. Well, what about the natural disasters that are happening around the world? Are those our responsibility too? The frequency with which we have natural disasters is not a functionality of climate change. It's a function of, we're either receiving from the hand of blessing or we have the hand of blessing and the anointing removed from us because we're a nation that is continually falling further and further away from God and operating in sin. Condoning it, advocating for it, legislating it into reality, that kind of stuff. I mean, for people who think that is like a fairy tale, that's how we feel about your allegiance to the financial redistribution scheme that is climate change. Remember, y'all can't even figure out what you want to call it, so you just picked a generic term to call it. At least we Christians are still calling everything the same thing we've called it from day one. We're still referring to the same source book, the Bible, as we have from day one. We haven't changed anything. It's you guys who keep shifting the narrative and changing the terms and redefining words to try to make us believe that we're all going to die in 12 years. The Bible says, no man knows the hour or the day. No man. That also includes us women. Nobody knows. So I know AOC is all the rage right now. She's totally in vogue. But that actress doesn't know anything about when this earth is going to, quote unquote, end. She doesn't even know anything. So then you have this Democrat, Himes, who says the Democrats, the DNC specifically, made the wrong decision in excluding Fox News from the debates. Now, this goes back to a lot of wronghead decisions that we're seeing being made. Now, all the Democrats will go to Wisconsin during the 2020 election cycle. That's something they're going to rectify that didn't happen during the 2016 election cycle and was part of the catalyst for President Trump winning that state and thereby winning the presidency. But they're saying now that they don't want Fox News to host a debate. Now, one of the points that's been made, I didn't clip the audio for this because I thought it was kind of crazy, but one of the points that's been made is that Democrats don't watch Fox News. Now, that's just not true. We know it's not true because you should see the way Democrats tweet about the things that happen on Fox News. Currently, there's some controversy with Tucker Carlson. I don't know what he said, this most recent time. I know it's probably something I agree with. I know what Jeanine Pirro said, which is actually not as bad as what I said last week about the lady who wears the headscarf. I call it the headscarf of oppression. Now, Jewish people who are liberals are all online saying that Jewish women wear a head covering and Jewish men, they wear the head covering as well, the little yarmulke. I'm not talking about that. Judaism is not used to oppress millions of people. Judaism is not the source of terrorism. So there is, I hate it when people take something that is truly harmless and benign, like Jewish people as a part of their faith wearing a head covering ceremonially or on a daily basis or whatever, and try to equate it to Sharia law, which is antithetical to the U.S. Constitution and Western ideals and values. And it is a sign that women are being subjugated and treated like property. And they try to make the two things the same thing. One of those things is evil and should never be permitted. And the other one is a part of a practicing faith tradition that is well established in this country. There is no comity between the two. And I'm sick of this comparison. And the idea that Jeanine Pirro was wrong when she said, that Sharia law is represented by the headscarf, it's just not true. And so I don't agree with everything that Jeanine Pirro says, but I can tell you this, she's been on the program, full disclosure, she's not wrong here. And so the fact that Fox News wanted her to make an apology and then she had to make a statement, so be it. She has to satisfy her employer. But I said it, and I'm not taking it back. It's the symbol of female subjugation and oppression, that headscarf. And she shouldn't be allowed to wear it in Congress because she's an American citizen. I don't care how long she was a refugee. She has no right to try to change what we believe about women in this country through her extension of Islam. Now what? Let me get back to Dr. Craig Albert.
In a move most Christians probably never expected to see, Walmart has created and is promoting a Facebook video ad that normalizes homosexual relationships. And they need to hear from you. The ad is part of a campaign released on Valentine's Day called Love is in the Aisle, a dating show at Walmart. Episode 2 features Pat and Andy, two homosexual men on a blind date as they meet at the store and shop together and discover whether or not they're compatible. Please sign the American Family Association petition to Walmart asking them to remove this pro-homosexual video and remain neutral on controversial issues. It's clear that Walmart is on the path to elevating homosexual relationships to the same level as the male-female model of marriage. Sam Walton must be turning over in his grave. Let Walmart hear from their Christian customers. We'll present the petition at corporate headquarters March 20th. Please sign our Walmart petition today at afa.net. That's afa.net.
This is Viewpoints with Kirby Anderson. Venezuela is in a total economic and humanitarian disaster. Inflation is rampant. The inflation rate has already exceeded 2 million%. All supplies, including toilet paper, are in short supply. Medicine is unavailable in most of the country, and food shortages along with a crumbling economy have forced people to change their eating habits. All are losing weight and battling malnutrition in what has come to be known as the Maduro diet. President Nicolas Maduro is one of the reasons for the economic devastation, along with the previous policies of Hugo Chavez. If you needed an object lesson on why socialism is bad for a country and its people, you need look no further than Venezuela. The economic resources are there. The husband of one of my colleagues used to travel to Venezuela with the major oil companies, which brought prosperity to many in the country. But the Chavez government started taking majority stake in various oil projects, and oil companies from the U.S. and Europe left the country. Oil prices dropped, and today we have a crisis so bad that people are eating out of garbage cans and catching and eating zoo animals, dogs, cats, and birds. Trying to get humanitarian aid to the people is difficult. Maduro has blocked aid from crossing the border, arguing that it could be a potential Trojan horse that would lead to military intervention. Earlier this year, the leader of the legislature, Juan Guaido, declared himself to be the acting president and has been backed by the Trump administration. Vice President Mike Pence declared to the people of Venezuela, "We are with you, we stand with you, and will stay with you until democracy is restored." He's also called for leaders in other countries to join the U.S. He said there can be no bystanders in Venezuela's struggle for freedom. We need to pray for our leaders and pray for the people in Venezuela who are suffering through this crisis. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
Take Kirby and the Point of View team with you on the go with the Point of View app. Search for Point of View Radio at the Apple or Google Play stores.
This is Stacy on the Right with Stacy Washington on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
Yeah. I just don't understand why. So apparently I said I didn't know what Tucker Carlson said. It's something he said like 12 years ago. He said something naughty. And so he issued a statement saying, I'm on the TV every night for an hour, every day, 5 days a week. So if you want to come on and disagree with me, you can. But in other words, something he said 12 years ago doesn't matter. I mean, sometimes it matters, sometimes it doesn't. I just don't care. And I don't even care to look up what it was, just because it's crazy that comments that were just made, like Ilhan Omar made comments last week that were anti-Semitic. The week before, she made comments. Ever since she's been in D.C., she's been saying incendiary things about Jewish people, and she's still on the Foreign Affairs Committee, and she still hasn't resigned, and she's not been censured. Even the resolution that was supposed to be against what she said and call her on the carpet had her name stripped out of it, and now refers to everything bad that anyone could ever say, which we were already against. Like, we're totally against racism and all that other stuff anyway. We're against white supremacy. We already against all that stuff. So we don't need a resolution from Congress to tell us we're against it. So she's claiming victory, and rightly so. She browbeat those liberals into submission, and now they're running around with their tail between their legs. Even Nancy Pelosi, who's supposed to be able to cut you and you not even know she was in your presence, according to her daughter, she even kowtowed, looked scared on TV when asked about it. Oh, yeah. She's run up against that buzzsaw of identity politics that she created, and it doesn't feel so hot. The cuts, they actually hurt. Right now, it's my pleasure to welcome Dr. Craig Albert, former president of the Georgia Political Science Association, graduate director of intelligence and security studies at Augusta University. Woo! Dr. Albert, thanks for coming on today.
Thanks for having me on.
So let's talk about what's at stake with North Korea in 2019. First of all, the latest news is that post-summit with the president, they're actually rebuilding one of the nuclear test sites or missile test sites that they destroyed. They're rebuilding it, which means we could have missile tests incoming whenever they complete the rebuilding of that site.
That's right. They could completely reconfigure this site, rebuild it, and be able to launch within a couple of months here. I think that's natural for North Korea to try to do. They're going to try to push the president's hand here and force him to capitulate to what North Korea wants here. That's normal politics. My bet is that President Trump is not going to capitulate, and we're going to force North Korea back to the negotiating table to get what America needs in our self-interest there.
So let's talk about a couple of other stories, because these things are all kind of happening. They're separate, but they're happening together in my mind because they all relate to the topic. First of all, the announcement that South Korea would pay more for us to have our military bases there. I'm not opposed to that. And then also that we're not having large-scale military exercises with South Korea. And that seems to be a kind of give to the North Korean regime to try to negotiate. And I'm not sure why we're giving him anything, because we haven't gotten much in return.
Yeah, I'm not sure why we're giving much either. It's a good faith strategy. We're going to do this in hopes that North Korea gives us something. So I think to test the resolve of North Korea, to see what they would give up, ceasing the military gains for a year or two was probably a smart decision by President Trump. But after they wouldn't give in to anything that we wanted at the last summit, if I was negotiating right now, I would not discontinue military games. I would start a little or a few of them at least to show North Korea that we mean business, that we're not just going to give you everything like the past administrations have done. You have to give us something if you're going to ask us to stop these games here. So I think that might be a mistake by President Trump. But he also wants – this is a volatile region, right? This is probably one of the most dangerous regions in the world right now. So if we all of a sudden start war games again, that could signal unintentionally to North Korea that we're preparing for some type of war, which could cause them to launch a missile, to test it. It might land anywhere unintended, and that could accidentally cause some type of major crisis. So we have to be very cautious with this. Most wars, most major wars are caused by accidents, miscommunications, misperceptions. So playing it slow and keeping your gloves prepared is a way to handle this. And I think the president is doing a good job at that.
So I kind of feel like, and obviously, so we never get to hear the meetings themselves. And when we get a readout of the meeting that the president has with any world leader, the readout basically says they sat and talked for 13 minutes and they discussed these topics. And so we never know whether it was contentious or whether there were arguments or if there were concessions made. It almost feels to me like, just from observing on the outside from a very, very, large distance, that without the tests over the past 20 some odd months, that basically the North Korean leader said, you could not do war games since I haven't tested a missile in this many months. And the president said, okay, sure, but they couldn't come to a treaty because at this point, as you said, Kim Jong-un and all of his family members that have been in power, they always play this game where they're good and well-behaved for a while, and then they go back to their original behavior. And it feels like the pendulum is swinging in the other direction, away from this current posture, which has been no missile testing, being friendly, behaving, meeting, et cetera, et cetera.
I think that's right on the money. The other big part that I've read and had access to a little bit is that North Korea, Kim Jong-un, had no idea that we knew about all his additional smaller nuclear facilities. And so President Trump came to the table and said, you need to close all of these. And Kim was absolutely dumbfounded. He had no idea our intel was that great. And so he pushed back completely and said, no, we don't have those sites. We're not going to close that. We'll close these. And President Trump laid out the intel, the satellite images, and said, we know you have sites here. And that was the end of the meeting because Kim did not know how to come back from that.
Wait.
Basically, our intelligence, from my understanding, human intelligence, and who knows how that got there, but also satellite imaging and everything just forced Kim to realize that he could not negotiate. He had no cards, hiding, left to hide.
Oh, my gosh, that is so interesting.
And that made him, think about his paranoid regime. He's like, how did the Americans get this kind of information? So you can expect that he's going to retaliate. There might probably is some type of purges going on inside the regime right now. He has the tendency, as most authoritarian dictators do, to kill anybody that leaked information or allowed any information to come into North Korea. So that's probably occurring right now. And it makes sense if you're an authoritarian leader to show some aggression after being humiliated like that. So he probably will launch some type of missile, but don't be surprised if it doesn't work all the way, and that would not be an accident.
I'm kind of flabbergasted that this guy, who he was educated abroad, apparently in Switzerland, that he doesn't know that we have satellites trained in on all of his entire country, and we know pretty much anytime they move anything bigger than a cardboard cereal box, we know about it. How does he not know that? How is he just now learning that we have that capability?
This is the problem with authoritarian leaders. You surround yourself with people who are not going to give you information that could displease you, because you're usually killed if you give information that displeases the authoritarian leader. So everybody just says, no, America can't do this, and they kind of lie to the leader, and it's a self-fulfilling prophecy at that point. They can't give him the truth because then he'll retaliate against them. And so they just all cover up for what's really going on and don't tell him the truth, and this is the situation he led into. That's why authoritarian regimes always fall. They implode upon themselves because of this sense of distrust, miscommunication within the regime, and an irrationally aggressive leader that kills his own people. It's going to fail eventually.
So just so we're clear here, because I'm just picturing Donald Trump. We've seen him in so many situations when he has the upper hand, and he actually, the thing about him and Kim Jong-un is Donald Trump seemed to really want them to have a good working relationship. Like, I felt like his overtures towards him have been so genuine and so truly friendly because he feels Kim Jong-un is really outside of the normal diplomatic processes. He's marginalized, but he does have some assets within his country that could be developed and made into, you know, a mechanism by which the country could come out of the dark ages and have electricity 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You know, the kind of stuff we take for granted here. Kim Jong-un could be credited with making those changes. And Donald Trump, from his personal life, is the kind of person who's made those kind of changes in New York, for example, changing the New York skyline, that ice rink they have, Central Park, all the projects that he undertook and was given credit for until he became the president. So he knows how that works, that kind of metamorphosis from one reputation to another through actual change that can be made that benefits people. But I just have to sit here and imagine for a second, Dr. Albert, they're sitting there and he's saying, yeah, we'll close these. And then President Trump presents all of these different, like these images, and we see this here, we see that. He had to have just been like completely, like, I can't imagine a situation in which he had anything to say back that was, you know, you don't have a comeback to that when someone completely outs you as negotiating in bad faith or lying or what have you.
Absolutely. He completely got owned, and he was caught. He knew there was nothing he can do. And this is where I think, you know, because unfortunately political scientists and, of course, politicians, you know, disparage President Trump because he's conservative, and they allow that to you know, create a lie over themselves where they can't see that he is a great negotiator. He did want to help North Korea, and all he was asking for was complete denuclearization. If you give us this security guarantee, we'll provide all the benefits that the West has. And that is a great negotiating strategy. And Kim wants this. He wants the economic satisfaction that the West has. He wants he's not poor, by the way. A lot of Americans don't really understand this. He has all the fancy Gucci and Prada and cars that, you know, just $200,000-$300,000 vehicles. He likes capitalism. He likes the West. He loves America. He has the biggest collection of American-made movies in the history of the world. So he loves our culture. He wants this kind of stuff. He just doesn't want his people to have it until he feels secure and stable. And that's what he's trying to get out of Donald Trump, is a guarantee that everything is going to go to him. But remember, to his people, if he denuclearizes, the biggest thing that he's afraid of, though, is that if he loses that nuclear option, his people will rise up and overthrow him. So this is what the big gambit is right now. And some political scientists take, for instance, Gaddafi, that he got rid of his nuclear weapons, and then there was an Arab Spring, and people overthrew him. I don't think that's the same case in North Korea, but one could surmise that Kim is thinking about this, that if he completely denuclearizes, he'll lose an option against his own people, against the military-industrial complex in his country, the Communist Party, and they will overthrow him because they won't be so fearful of what he could do. So that's something to consider as well.
But who in their country, because I have such a limited scope of, like, my viewpoint for the North Koreans is such that it seems as if, because he kills off people who disagree with him, he kills off anyone who might be a threat to him, anyone who might even be even slightly able to fill his role, he would have already had them killed or executed. So who exactly would it be that would want to take over from him and be the new dictator? Because it doesn't seem like they have the kind of training and education that would bring to power someone who wasn't just a copy of Kim Jong-un.
It'll be family members, high-ranking military generals, people that are dissatisfied with him and sense that he's weak. And so people, when he first assumed the power, thought he was weak. And so he automatically knew what to do and started killing people around him, started posturing in the international affairs very aggressively to show people that he wasn't weak. He killed his own family members. He killed his brother-in-law. He's killed his uncles. He's killed cousins. This is something that he does to show people he's powerful, because he doesn't have the military stature that the bureaucrats in his military have. And so as those officials rise up, it's just like Stalin. Anytime somebody helped Stalin plan something, he would kill them after it was successful because he was afraid that they would challenge his power. So Kim is the precise same way. He's going to kill anybody that he thinks is a challenge to his power, including those individuals that are helping him negotiate or to appease the United States. except his nuclear scientists. He's very nice to them, actually.
Well, I would imagine, because as long as they're alive, he maintains the illusion or the actual ability to create these weapons that would, increase his stature internationally. So there's a story over at Bloomberg that shows that the satellite images show North Korea rebuilding the long-range rocket site, and people are suggesting that another test is imminent. But you said at the very beginning of our interview that you thought whatever rocket test there was, it would intentionally not be successful. So basically just a kind of show of power or a show of defiance without any actual real capability yet.
So I'm sorry, I misspoke. What I meant to say is that I wouldn't expect it to succeed, in that there are countries that are engaging in operations to prevent a missile from being successfully launched. So right now there are several countries, we don't know precisely what they are, but we can assume the United States is leading this, that are interfering with the cyber mechanics necessary for a successful launch. So if the United States is indeed engaging in cyber warfare, what we would call acts or cyber attacks against North Korea, we would stop those missiles from successfully launching. I believe that's what happened with the failed missile test a few years ago. They kept blowing up over the ocean. They kept blowing up right after takeoff, 30 seconds into it or so, and Kim did not understand what was going on. I think we had something to do with that. And we shouldn't think that cyber operations haven't been going on between the two countries over the past 2 years. So we've been in his system searching for what he's been silently working on. So I would expect we know what type of missile is about to be launched and that we're inside that system waiting for it. Of course, we will never claim that it's us, because that takes away the initiative, that takes away the surprise and what we have in his critical infrastructure system, and it gives him a reason to strike back. So we won't claim it. But I bet if it doesn't go well, that's the reason it doesn't go well.
Which also explains the North Korean hackers attacking American systems. I think they were the ones who were behind the attacks on Sony that released the emails. Is that the same?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, absolutely. And then the next day, North Korea went black, and nobody knows why.
So this is why we love having you on. Thank you for your time today, Dr. Craig Albert, Graduate Director of Intelligence and Security Studies at Augusta University, and great friend of the show, expert extraordinaire. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you.
All right, talk to you again soon. We will be back with more after these brief messages. Stay right there.
This is Life Issues with Brad Mattis, president of Life Issues Institute.
The people of Toledo, Ohio have bestowed personhood rights on Lake Erie, while legal abortion continues to target and kill the city's unborn babies. Environmentalists petitioned for and won a special election to grant special rights to the lake due to pollutants. Activist Trish O'Dell said, "We believe the lake has the right to life, just like people have the right to life, unless it's the human babies in the womb. Special rights for nature are dangerous. Environmentalists already say abortion is needed to protect the environment. It's not a big step from a so-called Bill of Rights for lakes, rivers, and parks to mandate limited births and forced abortion if the radical left declare humanity to be a blight on nature. A court challenge is in the works."
Follow us on Twitter at Life Issues USA and stay informed, more informed than you've ever been.
Miki Addison.
My challenge to you was to evangelize your children and to disciple your children and to give them the truth, because if you don't do that, then we have a culture that's waiting in the wings to disciple your kids and to make converts. And so I really believe and I expect the Lord to really set some people free today.
The Marriage, Family, and Life Conference is coming June 20th through 22nd. Learn more and register at urbanfamilytalk.com. Just as David's mighty man Benaiah chased down a lion into a pit on a snowy day, Lion Chasers champions uncommon men and women of faith who are unafraid to stand up and speak truth to power in these dark and evil days. Never before has there been such a need for people of faith to draw a line in the sand with the sword of truth. Lion Chasers, the intersection of faith and public policy with Lonnie Poindexter. Weekday mornings at 10 Central on Urban Family Talk.
Media Minute with Howard Kurtz.
Bill Shine, former co-president of Fox News, has abruptly resigned as President Trump's communication director and deputy chief of staff. He's the fifth communications chief to leave that post, going back to the Mooch and Sean Spicer. Now, there was some talk early that the New Yorker piece on Fox News, which rehashed the circumstances of Shine's ouster from the network where he spent most of his career, might have been a factor. I don't really think President Trump cares about what the New Yorker writes. There were other reports from White House correspondents that they hadn't been getting along recently, that there have been disagreements over advice, and that perhaps Shine, in going to the campaign, is seeking a kinder, gentler existence. The question really to be asked, though, is this. Does President Trump, who talks to journalists virtually every day, who likes to be his own press secretary, who follows his own media strategy on Twitter, really need a communications director? Does he need to hire anybody to replace Bill Shine or do the job himself? With your Media Minute, Howie Kurtz, Fox News.
You can watch a live stream of the show on Facebook or YouTube at Stacy on the Right. Now, back to the show on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
I'm here for the men who actually want to have their baby.
It's been nearly 2 years since Ryan Major's girlfriend aborted their baby.
It was just like my whole world just fell apart.
And today he lives with a constant reminder of what could have been.
Right here in the first rows, I have a due date, and it's just when the baby was supposed to be born.
Majors filed a lawsuit in Madison County Wednesday, suing Alabama Women's Center, their employees, and the pharmaceutical company who makes the medication used in an abortion.
I believe that every child from conception is a baby and it deserves to live.
I talked to Dalton Johnson, who owns the Alabama Women's Center. He wasn't aware the suit had been filed, but did offer some insight into abortion procedures. The suit says the baby was aborted at 6 weeks. Johnson said at that point in the pregnancy, a woman can choose how she wants to end the pregnancy, either by medication or surgery.
I just tried to plead with her and just talk to her about it and see what I could do. But in the end, there was nothing I could do to change her mind.
And even though it's too late for Majors to stop his girlfriend's abortion, he said he wants to give a voice to other would-be dads who find themselves in the same spot.
Even though there's nothing I can do for the situation that I was in, there is something I can do for the future situations for other people.
And welcome back to the show. Thank you for being with us today. Find out more at StacyOnTheRight.com, at StacyOnTheRight on Twitter and Instagram. And thank you so much for being with us today here on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk. You know, and also live streaming to America's Voice TV. So how can I say this? I'm just going to go ahead and say it. Look, I'll tell you, like I've told our son many times before, we have these kind of frank chats, and it's good because I feel like, and I'll only know when, 10 years from now, if these chats have had a real impact on him in his behavior, not just on what he believes or what he says he believes or what he tells me in response to me talking to him, but the way he acts, the way he behaves. If you're having sex, you're saying you want to have a baby. That's first of all. And if you're a man and you are under any kind of misapprehension that in America today you have any rights over a child, you have the right to pay for that child after the child is born. You have the right to lose your driver's license and have your wages garnished for a child that maybe you didn't want. You say you didn't want it, but you had sex. You have that right. Women have the control in America today over what happens with babies before they're born. Afterwards, I mean, there's a burgeoning men's rights movement. There are a lot of men out there who've successfully sued for custody of their children and gotten it. There are a lot of men out there who are paying child support, but they're paying a significantly reduced amount because they, have negotiated settlements where they have their child 50% of the time. And that can happen. But the optimal situation is just keep it in your pants unless you want a baby. And when I say unless you want a baby, because most often it's the men who don't want a baby where the woman wants one and they have it. And it's the men who want a baby who are paired up with these chicks who they're just abortion minded and they're going to go kill that baby and go on about their business. Okay. You don't have any rights. Now, had he taken the extraordinary step of marrying this girl before they decided to show their love for each other in a physical way, then it would be much less likely that she would be, inclined to have an abortion. And even if she wanted to, at that point, he would have had some legal recourse. At least he could have tried. He could have tried to do something. Instead of at this point where they're just two people who choose to have physical relations with each other. And so just like I say to him, and I've said it to teen groups, I've been invited to speak to teen groups in the St. Louis metro area. When I do, I start off by saying, parents in the audience and teenagers, everybody in here, y'all need to know I wasn't asked out here to speak to you because I like to mince words or I'm afraid of using the anatomically correct names of body parts, or that I'm here to make you feel good. I'm here to tell you what God's word says about sexual relations, and I'm here to tell you the truth about what you should and shouldn't be doing with your body from the perspective of someone who's been married for over 20 years and has 3 kids of my own, and someone who absolutely wishes I hadn't made some of the choices that I made before I was married. Once God's word gets into you and you know the truth, you're supposed to share it. You're supposed to tell other people. When you have some wisdom, godly wisdom, and you have sought the scriptures and found out, yep, this is God's plan for marriage. This is God's plan for human sexuality. Then it's your job to tell other people about it. And I'm not shy about saying it. Sex is for people who want to have kids. It's supposed to happen within the bounds of marriage between one man and one woman and God. And if you decide to have sex outside of marriage, you're saying you want to have a child and pay child support to some woman who's now dating somebody else and making babies with somebody else. You're saying I'm interested in wanting this baby and seeing the woman that I quote unquote love take it to Planned Parenthood and let them kill it for her. You're saying all of these other negative consequences are something you want to roll the dice, you want to gamble with your future and take a chance instead of just saying, you know what? My physical body wants to be with this woman and she looks like someone I want to marry. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to seal the deal. I'm going to marry her. All these 5-year engagements and 2-year engagements and we got to finish college before we get married. No, you don't. I know a couple that lives right here in St. Louis. They started dating in high school. And when he went away to college, he was a year ahead of her. He came back, and when she graduated, she was accepted to college, and she chose to go to the same one that he went to. And they sat and they talked about their lives. They've shared this testimony before. It's one of the most amazing presentations I've ever seen by a husband and wife. And she said they were sitting and they were talking about the way they felt about each other and how difficult it would be to be in college and living in separate dorms. And then they started looking at what they really wanted to do. And he said, do you want to spend the rest of your life with me? Because I want to spend the rest of my life with you. And she said, yes, I do. But I also want to get my education. And so he said he went into his prayer closet and he started talking to the adults in his life that were his mentors, godly mentors. And they said, don't go into sin with her physically. Just marry her. You already want to marry her. She wants to marry you. Marry her. And instead of living in the dorm, get an apartment and right close to the campus, and y'all go to college and finish and get your educations. And that's exactly what they did. They did their undergrad, married, didn't have any kids, just married, living in an apartment near campus. He finished in 3 years because he said he was so desperate to get that undergraduate degree under his belt. He wanted to finish as fast as he could. So he finished his undergraduate degree in 3 years and then immediately went on to get his PhD. And he's a high school administrator, a principal. And she went on to get her PhD after they had their daughter, but after she got done with her undergrad. And they both finished early because they said once they were married and living in their apartment and going to school, it became, they went over the summer. They didn't take summer off and go home and stay with their parents and work some little minimum wage job. They just kept going all the way through so they could get done as fast as they could. What I'm saying to you is that there's no boundary when you love someone and you want to get married and that person wants to marry you. You've graduated from high school, go ahead and get married so that you are now, your physical union is consecrated to God and you have to walk in that blessing. Don't stop letting America's culture tell you what you can and can't do when you want to get married, which is something that God has for you. If you know you want to marry that person and they want to marry you, you can go to college and finish. Set your mind on what it is that you want to do. But this idea that you're going to date long distance and he's going to be on this campus and you're going to be on that campus over there and you're going to date and you're going to do, you know, there are a few people who've done it. I know a few people who've done that, but they're not the norm. Normally the relationship breaks up over the long distance. And the other thing is that college campuses are not set up for long distance dating. Everybody there it's just hookup culture. The men just share the women when the ratios are low. There's more men on campus than the women. They just share them. And it's known and accepted that everybody's having sex with everybody else. That's why they stopped having the dorms separate, men and women. Everybody was sleeping over anyway, and the college administrators like, just make them co-ed. And so they did. That's been going on for years, just decades. And so if you don't want to be in the same situation that this guy's in, where this girl that he was having these intimate relationship with, these relations, she goes and she aborts this baby and he's got nothing he can do. Now he's suing. And I wish him the best, outcome with that lawsuit. But the fact is, there's just decades of case law and Roe v. Wade itself, which gives the control over the baby to the woman because it's in her body, that don't support a lawsuit of this kind. Now, he could prevail, and I hope he does. But the issue here, he went wrong before she had the abortion. She was wrong. But they were wrong before that for they're just girlfriend and boyfriend and they're just having sex and doing the do and just enjoying themselves. And then the baby comes into the picture. What did they expect? That they were going to have marbles? What did they think was going to happen if they kept on having intimate relations, that one of them was going to all of a sudden have an orange in their stomach? No, they're doing all of the things needed to do to make a baby. And then everybody's surprised when they make one. And then he obviously didn't know her very well. He was surprised when she decided to have an abortion. You know, if you're a guy, again, something I tell my son, you know, it's not like I'm preaching at him. We have these conversations. They're in appropriate times, but they happen. I've told him many times, if you decide to go with someone based on their outward appearance because someone is hot or they have the physical attribute that you think is the most attractive, but on the inside, that person is someone who believes that feminism is a thing and that men need to be subjugated to women and that all men are a part of the patriarchy and are oppressing women, or some woman who believes that liberals have the best ideas politically, or, you know, first, utmost importance, a person who's not a Christian, then don't be surprised when that person begins to behave, regardless of whether or not the two of you love each other and you have all these intimate relations and stuff. Don't be surprised when that person starts to disappoint you in those areas because they don't believe the things that you believe. And I have to question whether or not you really believe them if you want to be that closely associated with someone who believes the opposite of what you've been taught all these years in our home. Choose wisely. This person that you pick will be the mother of your child. If you're not married, she'll always be the mother of your child. That will always be your child, and you will be connected to this person for the rest of your life. Is that what you want? To be connected to someone who has these wrong-headed ideas and would even consider aborting your child? You know, think about it. Beauty is fantastic. Being physically attracted to someone is wonderful. You want to be with someone that you have, you know, beauty in that person is something that's in your heart. But is beauty the most important attribute, or is it that this person believes the same things that you believe? That they truly love and honor God? You find someone who's gorgeous, when those looks start fading and, you know, they put on a couple pounds and y'all have some kids and she starts talking about Buddhism or Scientology or some strange astral crystal religion where you burn incense and rub crystals on your body, then what are you going to do? Say, no, I don't believe in that. I'm a Christian. And what's she going to say? Oh, I didn't know you were a Christian. Anybody who doesn't know you're a Christian, I mean, what's going on here? So these are the kind of things that if you say them to people, like, you shouldn't have been having sex, that's why you have all these problems. You're having sex outside of marriage. Well, that's just Puritanism. That's just, you're being intolerant. I'm not. I'm just commenting on what it is that you're living right now. And the commentary is meant to be a warning to those others who might be observing your behavior and thinking, yeah, it's okay. It's cool for him to do. It's cool for me too. It's not cool for you. When you sin in your body, you sin against the temple of the Holy Spirit. And when you do that, the implications are lifelong. It's not just the venereal diseases that, you know, they're not all cured with a pill. Some of them, the ramifications stay with you for the rest of your adult life. It's not just that. It's the emotional harm and turmoil, and it is the probability that if you are having sex outside of marriage, you are going to be tied to some nincompoop, some person who you'll be thinking 10 years ahead, I have a child with this person. You'll literally be laying up at night thinking, I can't believe I have a child with this person. This person is influencing my child in these ways, and I can't stop it because my child has to spend 50% of his or her time with this person. So choose well. Choose based on more than just the physical appearance. Choose based on the goals that that person has and what they believe. And it's not just what they say, because there's people out there who they'll tell you anything to get the relationship going. They'll tell you anything to get you. And then they'll tell a little bit to keep you. And then once they've got you, well, they've got you. Once they've had a few kids with you, they're like, okay, now I can let you see the real freak show that you got yourself involved in. Find out what they believe. And if they believe it, are they living it? If you're not living it, you don't really believe it. And above all of this, when you're going into this and you're thinking, this is a permanent, lifelong relationship that I want to engage in, I want to be with this person for the rest of my life, you have to remember that if you're not praying about it, and if that person is not willing to join together with you and make that bond with God, you can't expect success in that. So these lifelong decisions, it sounds so crazy because you make the decision about marriage. Most of us make it when we are we're not developed. We're immature. And that's just the way it works. You meet someone when you're younger, you marry them, and then you make your life together and you make that commitment that you're going to stay together forever. And you're going to do it in front of God, and he's going to enable you to do that. And he's going to grow the two of you up together, and he's going to strengthen that bond. He's going to create a tri-fold bond that cannot be broken. But if you're going to join together with someone who is as strong as a piece of paper and you're as strong as steel, what do you expect? Paper is going to break. It's going to melt under pressure or under water. It can be set on fire, but steel cannot. Don't go having sex with some stranger and expect good results from that. That's the show for today. God bless you. Have a fantastic evening. I'll see you tomorrow right here on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
The views and opinions expressed in this broadcast do not necessarily